At the Scottish conference, Nicola Sturgeon made an impassioned statement about the incompetence of our present government, but she linked it also to the Boris Johnson government. She said rather brilliantly it took the Conservatives 3 years to realise that Boris was useless. It took the Conservative government 3 weeks to realise that Liz Truss was useless. I'm not so sure she was so good at convincing the Scottish National Party conference that there was a viable route towards independence. What she did was to hedge her bets and say that if the legal position did not support a referendum immediately in 2023, she would hold her own independence referendum effectively at the 2024 general election. So one way or another, the Scottish National Party is going to be obsessed with the constitutional question for the next 2 years, which means that a lot of the questions about whether or not she is running her country efficiently will again be shelved. Now, I happen to think that Nicola Sturgeon is probably one of the most impressive politicians that we've got in Britain at the present moment, whatever her views about Scottish independence or not. Now, today we move into day 2 of the hearings about that Scottish referendum vote. And what we're specifically hearing, yesterday we heard a lot of explanations about why that vote was acceptable and why that vote should be considered, and indeed why this decision should be made in London, or why the decision to have the referendum could be made in Scotland, and why their lordships should allow that, why that decision should be made today or tomorrow. And the government lawyer has pointed out that actually we don't have all the facts, and we have no idea about how the Scottish government would in fact vote. Well, that's academic. In fact, we have a pretty good idea how the Scottish government would vote. The question hinges on one particular phrase, and I've got it here. The phrase is any other question. Any other question can be answered by the Supreme Court. So is the idea of holding a referendum any other question? And that's what we don't know. And that's what was not clear in the legislation. And that's what I suppose needs to be decided by the Supreme Court, by their lordships, today or tomorrow. My own hunch is that they will probably decide against a referendum, and that Nicola Sturgeon is already aware of that likelihood, which is why she was hedging her bets during the conference speech, which was otherwise a hellraiser, an absolute blast of rhetoric and control, a contrast to the lackluster, appalling performance, really, by Liz Truss, and indeed by everybody who followed her. Therese Coffey, a recipe for sleep, and she doesn't get any better when she goes on television. I don't really know what a vice prime minister is. We don't have one really. This is a made-up office. But as far as fantasy offices goes, Therese Coffey is hopeless. She's almost as hopeless in her fantasy office as Liz Truss is in her real office. We need a major reset in politics. And in the same way that President Putin is taking advantage of a serious vacuum in Western politics, we can see the mess in France at the moment with threats to electricity and health and so on because of strikes, food, and we can see the chaos in Britain. We can see the uncertainty in Germany and in the USA. Why are we surprised that President Putin thinks now is the time as he rubs his elfish hands in glee? No. No. In the same way that that Putin is taking advantage of the vacuum, so I'm afraid is Nicola Sturgeon taking advantage of a vacuum that has existed in British politics really since Brexit, or since before Brexit. The person who is responsible for this mess is David Cameron. Shame on him.